Hello everyone, welcome back to another video at Round 3 Design. This is Anya and today I have a thank you card featuring Lawn Fawn's Frosty Fairy Friends stamp set. I have a border punch there that I showed you that's from the American Crafts Knockout collection. It's a notebook edge. And my Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers, some adhesive I'm trying to use up, and here are the two stamp sets I'm going to use today. I originally started with black card bases and my Bristol paper, those are scraps, and some vellum. Then I have my sketch picked out, and here are the two papers from Bo Bunny's Altitude collection that I'm going to be using. The wood grain is called Rustic, and the snowflake is called Chili. Here's that sketch that I'm working with. You can see that notebook edge border punch inspiration there. Today I am working in multiples, so you'll see me do everything 8 times, or as much as I can show you of the 8 times. I usually work in multiples. I don't usually make a one-off card. And the reason for that is, 1, because I'm part of a card swap, and 2, because I give my cards to people that I know so that they can send them to more people that they know, which is kind of the whole point in making cards in the first place, right? So here I am toying with the idea of making a different piece for the layers in the background. I originally started with the snowflake paper at 4 by 5 1/4, and that would leave an 1/8 inch border all the way around on an A2 size card, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then I decided to try and see what this vellum looks like underneath the wood grain. And that wood grain paper, by the way, is cut at 3 by 4 1/2. So I decided to line them up and see which one I liked better, and I do like the vellum better. So I'm going to cut some more pieces to make the border that goes across there. And that's going to end up being 1 1/2 by 4 1/4. I was trying to decide between 4 inches or 4 1/4 inches, and I do like it to go the full length, so I'm going to go with the 4 1/4. So I'm going to cut down the snowflake paper again to 1 1/2 inches by 4 1/4. And that's what I'm going to use my border punch on to do the notebook edge, is this piece here. So I'm just finishing the rest of these out, and I'll have some extras left over of the original size that I cut, but I'll just put those away and use those on another project because I love this paper. It's beautiful. It just makes me happy. So I'm going to finish cutting out the rest of my vellum pieces now that I've decided that's the way I want to go at this point in time, because yep, I sure do change it up again. Decisions. There's just so many options to choose from here. So I'll get my last one done, count them out, make sure I've got all of them. And I've got everything set now, ready to assemble, and all ready to go. Now I'm moving on to stamping, and I was trying to decide which fairies I was going to put where, but of course I'm going to stick with just the winter fairies, the frosty fairies. And then I'm going to use some phrases from the other stamp set, which is called Fairy Friends. So I'm just lining these up on, these are just scraps of Bristol Smooth paper by Strathmore. And I always keep my scraps because this is very precious paper in our household. And we use a lot of watercolor brush pens on these kind of things. And I am using the Sukaneko VersaFine Onyx Black ink because it is permanent and waterproof, and I definitely don't want any bleeding as I'm coloring. So here I'm just lining up the last location that these fairies are going to be on this page, and I'll stamp those. You'll notice that I'm stamping multiple times because, again, I would rather stamp lightly and stamp multiple times than give my stamp CPR. These are really tiny images and I don't want to lose any of the detail. So now I've picked out my colors that are going to coordinate with my pattern paper, and I'm going to test it out on a scrap here just to make sure as I'm blending it out. This is deep blue and peacock blue. Oh, excuse me, the first one was peacock blue, this is deep blue, and this one is turquoise. So I like the way those look with my paper, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. When I use my Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers, I just put the color in the shadow areas, or where I assume would be the shadow, because I don't always follow the lighting rules. It's not something that I'm very practiced at, so I just do the best that I can and put it where I would assume the shadows would be. based on a single light source, because I'm not, again, not that complicated. Keep it nice and simple. And again, these are tiny images, so no one is really going to be looking at my coloring. As long as it looks good from a distance, it looks good close up too. So I'm blending out the first one is turquoise, the second one here is peacock blue, and I decided that dress was a little too dark later, so I'll come in and I'll add some more water to it and blend it out some more. And then the third one here is deep blue. I'm only going to color just these 3 fairies on camera for you. I'll color the rest off camera so that you don't have to watch me color 24 fairies, fill in all their cute little outfits. It still didn't take me that long. The Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers are very fast to work with, so it still doesn't take that long to do that many of them. And then I'm going to, here I go to blend out the peacock blue dress over here, and now I'm going to move on to skin tones. I'm going to do a different skin tone for each of these fairies, not to make it difficult on myself, but because we're all different colors in this world. So just like Sandy Allnock, I believe in her human rainbow. So for the first one, I'm using the skin tone is beige, and the second one, the skin tone is flesh color, and for the third one, the skin tone is oatmeal. And then I will pick 3 different hair colors to go with them as well. I also thought about doing pink cheeks for all of them, but decided the faces were too little and it wouldn't really matter, so I left that off. And before I do their hair, I'm going to do their wings, and all of their wings are in Shadow Mauve, or Mauve. I'm not sure how you say it in your area of the world here. And also the edgings and their scarves and muffs and the bands for their earmuffs, I'm going to do those all in light gray. And this doesn't need much blending. Neither the Shadow Mauve or the light gray need very much blending, so it's very quick and easy to do. And then we'll just blend it out real quick. I do come back later and put the Spectrum Noir glitter pen on all of these so that they all shimmer like the magical fairies that they are. And now we're ready to do hair. So I'm going to go with, I thought about doing natural gray for the darkest one, but decided not to. I went with deep brown. And for the one in the peacock blue dress, I did brown, which ends up being more of a red. I'm not really sure how they named all of these, but this is more of a red color when you blend it out. And the third one in the deep blue dress is going to be beige. She's going to have beige hair. So I'm just going to finish blending this one out. And you'll notice again as I'm coloring with, here's the deep brown, I'm only putting the marker in the places where I imagine the shadow to be. This is very rich color, so as I'm blending it out, it goes into the highlights or what I imagine is the highlights. And let's blend the earmuff a little bit more there. And that's it, all done. I'm going to use my Brother's Scan and Cut. This is the CM350 that I have, and I'm going to use that to cut out all of my fairies so I don't have to fussy cut them. I just wanted you guys to see how perfectly these cut out every time. There are some times that I have issues, but every time I can always figure it out. So I love using this when I'm doing multiples this way. And there they all are lined up. I'm going to use my Memento Tuxedo Black marker to go along all of the edges of all of the fairies so that the white core doesn't stick out outside of the black outline. And any place I need to touch up, there we go. I'll do the rest of them off screen, but here is where I'm at now. I made a few different choices. I've taken some Judikins embossable window plastic and I've run them through this embossing folder, and I've put my border piece together. I punched the edge with my border punch, but I've also added some dark blue and some of this berry purple to this border strip, and I think that fits in a little bit more closely with the wood grain pattern paper that I chose. So I'm putting adhesive all along my wood grain paper now and adding that to my window plastic. This is the embossable window plastic. And I decided to do this instead of the vellum because it just wasn't reading frosty to me. It was reading covered. So I decided to go with this. I didn't get them cut down to the right size. So I'm cutting it down just a little bit more so that there is a border on the card base. And then here are the borders that I've already put together. Again, it's got the dark blue, which happens to be the back of that turquoise snowflake paper, and this berry snow, I guess it's snowflakes, but it's more like a bokeh paper. And I'll get all those lined up there, and you'll notice they're all on black backgrounds, black card bases, but they don't stay that way. I'll switch them out here in a minute. Now I'm working on where to put my greeting. So I'm still looking at my sketch. I'm still going in a horizontal manner here, and I'm pulling out what I intend to be the phrases. I really love these word dies from Little B, and this thank you fit perfectly with what I was working on. So I'm just auditioning here some of the different nesting frames that I have to make a banner of sorts to put my greeting on. And I knew I wanted the big fairy from Frosty Fairy Friends, and there's a stamp in the Fairy Friends that says thank you very much. It's all one word, but it has a smaller word fairy. So I wanted to do the big fairy from the Frosty Fairy Friends. And I've decided I'm going to go with this bracket type, and I'm going to only use half of it. So I only had to cut it out 4 times, and I'll cut them in half, and that will give me my 8 that I'm working on. And then I'm going to audition here. I put the small fairy back in there, and I'm auditioning. Am I doing the die, or am I going to do the stamp that says thank you? And just going back and forth between the two. So I am going to go with the die cut thank you, the large fairy from Frosty Fairy Friends, and the much from Fairy Friends. And I pulled out my Misty. I'm going to line this up at the flat part of the banner with my Misty in the corner there, and I'm just putting some powder so that my embossing powder doesn't stick on my vellum piece as I'm working. I am going to emboss with, this is Versamark ink and Ranger Super Fine Detail embossing powder in white. And you'll see as I'm touching my banner here, you'll see later that I don't repowder it with my magic powder bag so that my embossing powder doesn't stick, and I'll have some cleanup to do there. So in the other corner, I've lined up the big fairy word, and I'll emboss that with the same embossing powder, and you can see where it's stuck there. I'm just using a dry brush to do that little bit of cleanup. And there we go. The heat gun that I use is the Wagner heat gun, but I was previously using this one from Mauve Yoshida, and it worked pretty well. Not my favorite color though. And here I made my final decision that I'm going to go with the die cut word. So out of that same dark blue paper that I put on the border, I'm going to use that to die cut the words thank you. Now I've cut that shorter so it looks a little better, a little more balanced. And now I'm ready to stick that on there. And here's those words that I have die cut. I usually would do this out of a plain paper, but this is a subtle pattern that I think just ties in a little bit more of the blue from the fairies and the border, that it just worked better for me. And here's where I finally start getting happy with it. I turned it to a portrait and it just started falling right into place. Everything looked like it matched and everything went well together and fit properly. There was a good balance between the top and the bottom. And then I decided that the black was too harsh. So you see I popped it off and I put it onto a dark gray cardstock. And it still is dark. It still gives a good contrast, but it's not harsh, it's not glaring. And I think it puts more focus on the fairies and the greeting rather than, hello, here's a black background. So I adhered my banner piece with just a little bit of glue underneath the edge that I tucked under the border, and that is Tombow Mono Multi Glue in a fine line 20 gauge bottle. And I'm using just my Fiskars fine tip scissors to cut some 3M foam tape to put behind my fairies. I am getting fussy with the placement behind the legs and the wings, but it's not necessary. I'm being overly fussy here. I don't know why I do this, but I like to make more work for myself. And I'm going to adhere those and line them up pretty much evenly across this border strip. I really like it in the portrait mode. It makes a good grounding base for the fairies. They don't look like they're flying off. I did tuck a little bit of glue underneath the embossed words. And now I'm taking that Spectrum Noir sparkle pen, and this is in crystal clear. I'm just adding that to the die cut words and then to the fairy wings. And I'm just doing a little bit of cleanup with my tweezers there. Before I add it to the fairy wings, I'm going to take, this is Ranger Glossy Accents. It's just the big bottle that I put into a little fine tip bottle. I do not recommend this bottle. I ended up throwing it away half full of Glossy Accents. Kind of broke my heart a little bit, but I definitely prefer a fine line bottle rather than this one. There we go. And here's where I'm adding it to the wings. Got a little bit on her earmuff, so I wiped that off. There we go. We'll wing up the rest of these sparkly ladies here. And that does it for this card. So thanks for coming to watch, and give it a thumbs up if you like this video, and subscribe if you'd like to see more. And I will see you next time. Bye!